When this anime first came out, I heard many good things from it. People praised the animation, the story, and the emotional connection it elicited towards its watchers. And so, younger me thought to himself, I'll wait for the perfect time to watch this anime because I got other things to do. I wanted to experience it at my best. But I never got to watch the anime. And so for years, I held this show in high regard without watching a single clip or episode from it until on November 28, 2025, I decided to pick it up and finally watch it for the first time. And in the next few days, I never would have expected how disappointed and distraught I ended up being. This anime is very beautiful. I will not deny that. How it was animated and the colors shining so vibrantly made me want to bump up the brightness of my laptop just to experience its vividness fully. Even the music wasn't an area they neglected. The OST was actually good. All of it, along with its beautiful scenery, heightened the overall experience. I have no words for the show's aesthetic because it is simply that beautiful. That's it. But how you execute those aspects properly will always be under scrutiny. Let me present to you a scene from episode 2 that is visually stunning, but one that never quite landed emotionally for me. In it, Violet reveals to Erica why she wants to ghostwrite in the first place. She wants to understand the words, "I love you," the last thing Gilbert said to her before he died. There's nothing wrong with this context. In fact, on paper, it perfectly sets up Violet's emotional journey. What held me back was the need to reinforce the moment with the sudden parting of clouds, sunlight breaking through, and an orchestral song guiding the feeling. It becomes a recurring pattern throughout the show, a way of steering audience emotion instead of letting it develop naturally. Now, a quieter approach would have suited the scene better. Violet delivers those lines without fully grasping their weight, still emotionally detached because of her upbringing, yet desperately wanting to understand them. That alone is intimate. If the moment had been allowed to breathe without the surge of music or the dramatic lighting, the emotional shift would have come through more organically, both for Erica and for us. In that sense, the audience could have experienced the scene the way Erica does, quietly, gently, and with the space to feel the sincerity behind Violet's confusion and yearning to understand those words. In comparison, let me bring up a scene from Tokyo Ghoul Season 1, Episode 2. Up to this point, Kaneki has undergone a sudden and traumatic transformation into a man-eating ghoul, and we watch how rapidly he collapses under the weight of it. By the end of the episode, he's in genuine despair. He nearly devours his own childhood friend, realizes he can no longer live the life he once had, and everything familiar is slipping out of reach. But in that moment of complete breakdown, someone reaches out and shows him that his story doesn't end in suffering, that there's still a place for him in this new world. The lighting, the quiet intensity of the music, and the pacing all work together because the emotion feels earned. Even with so little time spent with these characters, the scene resonates naturally. And that's the difference. It shows how a series can maneuver the audience's emotions without ever feeling artificial or forcing the reaction. One of my main gripes of this show is how it utilizes the music, scenery, and melodramatic dialogue to elicit an emotion. I used to think that whenever an anime is beautifully animated, with expressive characters and amazing soundtracks, it immediately becomes a good show. I was wrong to hinge on the idea that the aesthetic aspect of a show is a vital key in how well made it is. Many of the characters seem to speak sentimentally, which isn't reflected of how people speak in real life. It ends up becoming a theatrical play. But even theatrical plays have their context and are allowed to do so. Here, it just feels over the top and dramatic. The constant melodrama of the characters, from the lines of Hojin's towards Violet saying that she's burning within and she must face her scars, seem very exaggerated. And this might be a tasteless comparison, but in this scene, Violet places down the teddy bear given to her by Hodgins as she proceeds to suffocate herself, accompanied by fast violence. All of it just feels performative. There's no sense of hopelessness or loss here. It just feels like she's trying to show us, look at how much I'm suffering, rather than it being genuine. In comparison, here we have Reiner from Attack on Titan. If you've seen the anime, then you already know what he's been through. He puts the rifle in his mouth, ready to end it. Then the music rises intensely. But before he could even do it, an unlikely intervention happens as Falco slams his hand on the other side of the wall, not knowing he just prevented Reiner from committing suicide. And you can see it in Reiner's face, the realization setting in, as if he just couldn't believe he was about to do that. You can see the sweat on his eyes and the saliva on his gun. Now, while these two may have completely different contexts, there's a clear distinction between someone who is willing to do it versus someone who is simply performing and trying to act for the sake of sympathy. So the audience ends up thinking how emotional this scene was for them rather than for Violet and her struggles. One more added detail I want to mention is how the show handles certain scenes that do have weight. In episode 7, we are introduced to a father who was wrecked by the loss of his daughter, and he ends up seeing Violet as if that was his own child. There's a scene with the dad during which he was sharing what happened to his daughter to Violet. I thought it was good. The music wasn't over the top, making it feel intimate and heartfelt. But for some reason, this was the perfect time for Violet to run her mouth. She couldn't let the scene sit by itself or let the dad's emotions simmer down a bit just for the sake of saying the words, "I never knew parting with someone dear to you was so sad and painful." Well, I'm sorry, Violet, but no shit. I appreciate you telling me what I already felt, but there's no need to tell me again. They could have let her emotions be recognized without any dialogue. Let her cry or show the sadness on her face. Instead, they just had to spell it out for us. I wouldn't exactly call this episode good, even though the idea is interesting, especially when it's done right. The reason behind that is because there are certain scenes to me that feel tacky or over the top, albeit it would have been better depending on how the father reacted when he suggested Violet to run on the leaves in the lake. If he saw it as a form of sincerity or even wholesome for Violet accepting his fairy tale favor, then I would have found it nice. But of course, with Violet Evergarden, everything needs to be glorified. He starts getting emotional, face scrunching, tears welling up, the music starts to swell even more, followed by flashbacks of his daughter, Violet running on the lake in slow motion, and even going as far as to call her a god. I mean, everything is just over dramatic. If Violet fell straight into the water, she probably would have thought, damn, I failed in fulfilling this guy's wishes. But because he already looked at Violet as if she was his daughter, he would have immediately ran to her aid and helped her, something he could have experienced with his real daughter, except they decided to go down the fancy route. It doesn't feel grounded. It's a fantasy dressed up in romantic tragedy. I have nothing against the show emphasizing its main protagonists. In fact, protagonists are my favorite characters because authors let them go through the most development and growth. We become a part of their journey, even though some of them might turn corrupt. But it seems like the world of Violet Evergarden exists solely to service her. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I want to show you a few scenes from different episodes, starting with episode 4. Iris gets called up in her hometown and was accompanied by Violet due to her being injured. Both find out the client was actually Iris's mom. Violet then proceeds to introduce herself to the family, but out of nowhere, the wind suddenly blows and the leaves scatter around as she does a curtsy, while her face glows majestically, and everyone is in awe, solidified by the mom saying her breath was taken away. I mean, sure, Violet is beautiful, but what is up with this Disney princess-like treatment? I thought if the context this time was a dude, and he starts falling for her, I would have thought, yeah, this is plausible. I mean, the anime did it, but I just didn't like it. Because in episode 6, that is exactly what happens. She meets a guy who works in an astronomy library. Now, the guy, Leon, presented himself as being cold, even towards women. I just thought it was simply him being young, therefore he acts childish. So I let it slide. Yet when he looks face to face with Violet, it just seems like his stone cold heart melts, and he can't believe a beauty like her exists. He was even staring. So the message I got was, as long as the woman was beautiful, they can melt a cold man's heart. I mean, yeah, sure, great message, right? Not whatever personality the girl has. Sure, okay. Moving on, some guys came up to Violet to talk behind Leon's back. But this just backfires since she is an orphan herself. He then finds the courage to ask her out to watch a comet, and Violet agrees. So far, normal teenage behavior. I'm not too sure because I don't understand people easily, but isn't finding out that a girl you have an interest on reveals she loves someone else, then oversharing your past after you just met in a few days, doesn't matter the context, and then asking her a hypothetical question that involves that loved one being in serious danger, and you couldn't save them even if you want to, would you still go? I mean, seems kinda odd. Although you could argue it was meant to understand his mom's intention. Right?
Without them here, I'd rather be dead.
I see. Okay then.
You deserve that, you manipulative prick. I'll show you the last scene because finding more scenes would just needlessly prolong this video. One of the worst episodes, episode 11, Violet finds out that a soldier requested a doll to ghostwrite a letter. But because of how dangerous the area he was in, it wasn't wise to risk a doll's life. Of course, in the goodness of Violet's heart, she pushes through without consulting anyone. It just so happens that her client gets shot in the back, leaving him the last one alive. But then, Violet not only reaches the soldier, who had clearly deviated from the location, she arrives just in time to intercept the enemy soldiers who shot him. What follows is absolute ridiculousness. She Naruto runs through a hail of bullets, dodging every single shot, incapacitating them all with ease, and even the leader decides the best course of action is to let both of them go. Not remembering that just minutes ago they had wiped the client's team without a second thought. I mean, sure, you could argue they stood no chance. But if the story was trying to show what soldiers go through, the least it could do was avoid painting them like ultra villains just to make Violet look heroic. Instead of tension or risk, it feels like a self-serving show, turning what should be a dangerous tense scenario into a glorified action scene. But that's not it. This scene was the worst one in the anime. She relays the truth of the soldier's fate to his parents. I will be honest that I have never taken a job similar to that of a casualty notification officer. Simply put, they provide information to the families of the service member who passed away or was seriously injured. But I can guarantee you a job like that would break me. Heavy moments like these tend to be the most difficult and hardest things to portray, especially in fiction. But it shouldn't be an excuse to undermine the gravity of it. Instead of Violet processing these heavy emotions she felt, and the focus being on the grieving family, it ends up servicing Violet so that we, the audience, can see the development of her emotions. So you're telling me the death of this young man was used as a device so that we see how it affects Violet? I'm sorry if I sound a little emotional, but I find it absolutely disgusting. I could give you far better examples with films that, in my opinion, did far better in portraying what these people go through, with the obvious example being The Messenger. I understand it is fiction, but when you involve death and close realism to your stories, just know I will be very critical about things like these. A character dying in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure would not be the same in real life, but an anime dealing with topics like death, war, and grief should not romanticize it, nor use it as a shortcut to develop the protagonist's emotional depth. Mind you, all of this happened in one single episode. And you know what? I might as well show you this scene, and I don't have to explain why it is horrendous.
Please, Pete, I need this. My mom is kind of homeless. I live with my dad. I want to help her out.
Speed, I'm watching the stream while you try not to laugh, bro. That's disrespectful, bro. What's wrong with you, bro? Stop laughing, bro. Look at you smiling, bro. You disrespectful as bro. You don't like your fans? You don't like your fans? Why you laughing at your fans, bro? Nah, real disrespectful as bro. I'm not laughing, Speed.
But I will give credit where credit is due. Episode 10 for me was by far the best episode they had. Although an anime of this caliber should have that as the standard quality of writing and direction. While the episode did not necessarily make me cry, it did, however, move me. It was genuinely good. My initial rating of a minimum 7 for Violet Evergarden would have stood if they continued to have the same structure and quality as episode 10 did. One of the main things why this works so well was how believable it is. In a show that talks about war, soldiers, trauma, and grief, I expected it to have the same sentiment as episode 10. Now, while the show did not uphold that vision, I began appreciating this episode far more than I first anticipated. With Violet being more of a secondary character and the daughter taking center stage, I have never felt so invested in this anime until now. Particularly how the two of them had this special dynamic. Because of Violet's devoid, or as a result of it, mature way of handling the job, it felt far more grounded compared to her ghostwriting for a 14-year-old princess who has an interest on a 24-year-old man. But it's fine, right? Because it's covered in twinkly and fuzzy feelings and roses. Shut up. Ignoring that, you could genuinely see the potential of what the show could have been. Intimate but powerful, simple yet emotionally grounded, or the use of orchestral music, or even the melodramatic dialogue. It was good. It genuinely was enjoyable. But of course, this wouldn't be Violet Evergarden if we don't have her telling us how she felt. The arc was closing up in a somber manner. If Violet reacted quietly, it would have hit harder. Because we don't need words to affirm her emotions, just look into her eyes. See her face, see the emotion pouring out. Yet, it feels like the show is reminding us this is how you're supposed to feel. I know Violet has difficulty understanding emotion, but for someone who at first was devoid of it, she easily finds the words needed to explain it, and not only did the arc itself felt tainted, but her reaction slumped in impact. This show tries too hard in being emotional, in carrying all of its sentimental nature. It's too ambitious. And it made me think what the show could have actually been. It bothers me that the premise of this show had so much potential. Not knowing what happened during the period when Violet was a soldier meant her identity was shrouded in mystery. And so the focus turns into the post-war society along with the effects of it on soldiers and civilians alike. Then later on, progress it with Violet's past and emotion. Instead, the focus was solely on her. Out of the 13 episodes of this series, only 2 stood out to me. As I've mentioned previously, episode 10 takes the highest praise, and the other one being episode 3, although not as impressive. The story of Luculia and her brother was far better than most arcs in this anime. This was in the beginning when Violet was struggling in writing properly, and they only needed 2 episodes to present the strained relationship between the siblings because of their parents passing during the war. Seeing as how Violet helped in resolving their issues with a simple letter felt genuine and personal. This is because even with her difficulties understanding emotion, she tends to be direct and straightforward in her approach, lacking the usual indirectness people tend to do, which, ironically, allows her words to carry a certain honesty. The idea of ghostwriting overall is an interesting angle, especially with the added context the anime is set in, which is a post-war society. Yet, it's striking that the only storylines that truly resonated with me were the mother and daughter coping with the loss of a husband, and the siblings struggling with the aftermath of their parents' deaths during the war. This is where the anime should have stayed in line. Stories of everyday people who went through so much because of the conflict, Instead, they thought that parents lining up partners for their children, a kid falling in love with an adult trying to paint a rosy relationship, a socially awkward young man who over-romanticizes a girl he just met and trauma dumps on her in less than a week, and to top it all off, she's treated like a plot-armored superhero facing enemies who act like comical villains and never actually threaten her. Also, just the story can focus on her emotional arc. I'm no writer, but couldn't the author, I don't know, read up on history of women soldiers since the beginning of human history and learn about what they did? They could have gotten inspiration from them. I just feel like the show's own potential and the weight of its premise gets completely wasted. All for the sake of treating Violet like some untouchable moral hero who only suffers conveniently for the plot. I had very high hopes and expectations when I first picked up the show. The animation is there, the art style is there, the soundtrack, the voice actors, it is absolutely beautiful. But so empty at the same time. Hollow melodrama and a plot that isn't grounded. I genuinely wanted this whole thing to work. But it was so hard to immerse myself and fully fall in love with this anime when you have a story only servicing the protagonist. But that's pretty much it for me. I can keep talking for hours about this anime, but that watching experience is one of the worst I've had. Have a blessed day, afternoon, evening. I'll see you in the next video. Sayonara.